When you're talking about Microsoft and Sony, it's pretty obvious there are some people who are very emotionally attached to their pieces of plastic. Now, the people this video is directed at is a tiny but loud minority. But for everybody else, I do hope that it serves as a better understanding as to how and why I bring you the stories that I do. So, over the last few weeks, there's been a few people who have been upset at the number of negative stories I've run on Sony. And anytime I post up a story that doesn't reflect Sony in a positive light, I can guarantee the same people will show up with the same old comments with, "Dragon's an Xbox fanboy. Red's an Xbot. I wonder how much Microsoft is paying him." That last guy, I think, had a hole in his throat from smoking, probably. But the same people who say these things usually have a pretty selective memory when it comes to negative Xbox stories that I've done in the past. They tend to forget about E3 reveal and how I bash Microsoft and praise Sony, or about how just a few weeks after the Xbox release I made a video, should you buy an Xbox One? And I said no, there wasn't enough here to warrant a purchase. They forget about me bashing the party system as going like 10 steps backwards from the 360. They forget about me talking about how getting the Xbox One seemed like a step backwards from the 360 with all the features that were missing at launch. They forget about me talking about how the parity clause isn't helping anyone, including Microsoft, developers, and us, the consumer, and how I praised Sony and their policies with indies. When Microsoft was giving their PR spiel about how Kinect could never be unbundled because the Xbox needs Kinect in order to function right, I said this is complete bullshit, and I believe they will eventually unbundle it because, truth be told, you do not need the Kinect in order to play the Xbox. And I could go on and on and on, but those who have been here long enough don't need a recap of the things we've talked about. Now, the same people who are upset about the negative Sony stories, they seem to always forget to comment, or maybe it's just not showing up in their sub boxes, the videos that I do on Sony that are positive or are neutral, just news in general. You know, when we're talking about sales numbers or updates coming, new features, devices, their selective memory seems to only be tuned in and focused on the negative stories. Now, it is true that lately I've posted up a lot of negative stories on Sony on this channel. We've covered the PlayStation Network issues and the network being unstable after the stability updates. We've talked about how numerous people are reporting that the message system for PS4 has been running extremely slow. I mean, I would think that if you pay for a service that has to be online, you should expect less downtime. And I feel like that's a topic that you should be able to talk about. And you should be able to compare Xbox Live and PlayStation Network. We talked about the PS4 2.0 firmware update and how it caused a lot of issues for a lot of players. You think it's unfair to suggest Sony might want to take a page out of the Microsoft playbook and have a beta preview program to ensure things like this don't happen? We should just ignore these stories while they're happening and pretend it's not going on? Or what about when IGN reviewed Morpheus, and this is after I've done several videos on Morpheus, telling you about the cool technology, telling you about virtual reality, and then I did a video talking about how IGN reviewed it, and one of the reviewers said that he got sick and the resolution was low and compared it to a 3DS game, and the other reviewer said he was like in a blurry movie theater with no glasses. We should just pretend those reviews didn't happen? Those people didn't say those things after I've told people on my channel about the technology. These people might be interested in purchasing it. I shouldn't tell them about potential issues during development. And when I tell you stories like that, it does not mean that Morpheus is going to look like a blurry movie when it comes out. This is just development process and how it's going. It's just information. When EA Access announced that it was skipping the PS4, A lot of people jumped out with their pitchforks and were going after EA and greedy Microsoft, saying how much did Microsoft have to pay EA to make sure that EA access didn't come to Sony, when it was actually Sony who told EA no. Maybe because Sony has their own subscription service they want you to buy into. That wasn't supposed to be discussed. We weren't allowed to talk about that. We weren't supposed to do away with the misconception that was taken as truth, and we should have just let it be. Drive Club, a game revealed back in February 2013 as a launch title for the PS4 and marketed as that all the way up until less than a month before the PS4 release, and then it was pushed back. And then there was another delay. And some people got upset during the development of the game. I ran a story where after Sony received one of their financial reports, they then went through and laid off a bunch of developers. And some of the developers were from Evolution Studios. And I said, could this number of developers being laid off have an impact on the game? And of course, people jumped all down my throat. Dragon, why are you talking about that? It's normal for developers to be laid off during the development of a game, right in the middle of it. And here we are, a year later, a month after the release of the game, and it's still not working right. Still no sign of the PS Plus edition. All while Sony is still hoping you'll buy the full game. But I shouldn't be talking about stuff like that, right? When Sony representatives are pressed repeatedly as to whether or not publishers can disable their games, not just certain cutscenes, but the full game from SharePlay, and Sony responds repeatedly that they can't, and then it turns out that they actually can, that's a non-story, right? When Sony as a company is bleeding billions in losses, we shouldn't be talking about it. We should just ignore it, and then hopefully the problems will go away. I can tell you that doesn't work. I tried it with my ex-wife. Are any of these stories fake? Did I make up any of these stories? Or did I simply give you information that 100 other journalists and news sites are reporting? Maybe there have been a number of negative stories on Sony recently on my channel. But maybe that's because there's been a lot of negative stories about Sony recently. Well, Dragon, why do you have so many stories on Microsoft and Xbox on your channel? And that's a good question. I've went over it repeatedly, but I'll be happy to go over it again for new people. First off, Microsoft tends to be in the news more than Sony simply due to the nature of their business structure. Microsoft, primarily a software company. They do have their own hardware, but everybody knows Microsoft for their software. And what happens with software? It changes constantly. And so that's why you hear about all these stories on my channel like Cortana and Windows 10 and apps and DirectX 12 and the cloud. And Microsoft's in a lot of different areas, and so they tend to be in the news more. And none of those things that I just mentioned are just for Xbox One. They're all things that Microsoft has built for other areas of their business, but Xbox One gets to benefit from all that. So that's why I bring these stories to you, and that's why you hear these stories that you a lot of times don't hear on other networks. That's why I was talking about the cloud and dedicated servers and all that months before everybody else started talking about it, because I've been keeping up with the technology related news. And it's not just for Xbox, it's just, you know, if you go and read technology related news sites, you'll get this information and you can see how it will relate to the Xbox One. And it's come out since then that it does all relate with the Xbox One. Microsoft's been putting out monthly updates, so of course we have a lot to talk about usually. And I post up more Xbox content on this channel because I own an Xbox. You know, I was reading a comment the other day and somebody said, Dragon would never admit he likes Xbox. Do what? I've said like a million times I like Xbox. Why else would I own one? Why else would I continue to buy games for it? I mean, no shit, Sherlock. Because I own one and I'm very familiar with the system, you're going to get a lot more coverage of games and stories related to it. And I've been very clear about why I haven't purchased a PS4 yet. It's not any hidden secret. I've said clearly, I want to buy a PS4. I have every intention of buying a PS4, but I need an exclusive game that I must have a PS4 in order to play. And currently at the moment, Infamous, Drive Club, Knack, Little Big Planet 3, Last of Us just doesn't interest me. That is just me being completely honest with you. And a lot of PS4 fans feel the same exact way about owning an Xbox One, and they don't care for Titanfall or Forza or Halo, Sunset, Killer Instinct, etc. And that's cool. It's not for everybody. A lot of players who are fortunate enough have all systems. I would love to have all systems. I'd just love to have an open wallet where I can just go out and buy whatever the hell I want to, buy every game that released. I mean, that would be the ideal situation for a gamer. But that's not the way reality works for some of us. And just because I like one console doesn't mean I dislike another console. But just because one console is popular and is also a future interest of mine doesn't mean I'm going to be an apologist or not call out bullshit when I see it whenever it's reported or when it's underreported. So Dragon, where are all the negative Microsoft stories recently? It's a good question. Where are they? You know, I mentioned a lot of negative stories I ran on Microsoft early on, talking about their DRM policy, their party system, forcing Kinect. But guess what? I didn't buy a console that had any DRM features on it. And Microsoft has unbundled Kinect. And they've released a ton of updates that's fixed the party system and everything else that I was complaining about for the most part. You know, is it perfect? No. But it's a hell of a lot better than what it was. And honestly, Microsoft has had a string of good news since they stumbled out of the gate and since they fell on their face. I mean, they got their asses handed to them. And we've covered that on this channel. How many times do you want to hear it? Microsoft got their asses handed to them. But I can tell you, if Microsoft puts out a game and it's not working a month after release, you better believe I'm going to post up a video on it. If I had a common occurrence where I could not sign into Xbox Live whenever I go to play, you're going to hear about it. If Microsoft was losing billions of dollars and their credit rating downgraded to junk, you'd hear about it. But so far, Microsoft has actually been posting up pretty good profits. They've made a ton of 180s and they put new leaders in charge. They've announced some interesting things and features coming, along with a pretty decent list of exclusive games. And their console is selling well. No, it's not selling as well as the PS4, but that does not translate into it's doing bad. Microsoft's really the only bad news I can think of has been the whole resolution gate, which I have beaten to death on this channel, have I not? And to be completely honest with you, most people don't care. Go watch the videos that I've done on it. Those are some of the least watched videos that I do. People just don't click on it. People don't want to know that information. So as a YouTuber, since my time is pretty limited, I'm going to pick stories that people want to watch and listen to. And they want to hear about this stuff. And it must be happening because so many people are getting upset about it. It's not to say that all is doom and gloom for the PS4. I mean, they're working on their own list of exclusives. They've got their own new hardware that they're working on. They've got a big show in December called PlayStation Experience where they're supposed to announce a bunch of new games. And if there's something worthwhile in that show, then I will bring it to you. But the fact of the matter is, I post stories that I think are relevant, informative, entertaining, and factual. And for all the comments, you know, of people calling me an Xbot or a fanboy or a redneck, whatever, you know, if that's where you have to take the conversation, you have to dumb down your argument to a 4th grade reading level, you've already lost. Those people, you know, they can call me names all day long. What you don't hear them calling me is a liar. You don't hear them telling me that I make stuff up. I always send you to the source of the info that I give to you. And I think that's why most of you are here. And I think that's why this channel continues to grow. That's not to say that I haven't made mistakes. That's not to say that I won't make mistakes. But you better believe that I take giving you accurate information pretty serious. And I always try to do my best to research a topic before I bring it to you. If Sony, Microsoft, whoever does something good I feel is worthwhile talking about, you're gonna hear about it. If they screw up bad enough, you're gonna hear about it. Good news or bad news, it's just news to me. But let me tell you what's going to change on this channel. Not a damn thing. That does for me, the Red Dragon. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.